better? I know I was given great instructions on how to hold a microphone, so. All right, well, good evening. My name is Eileen Cassidy Rivera, and can't hear me. How's that, better? Better? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Rod. All right, wonderful. Well, again, welcome everyone tonight. Thank you for coming out on a Monday night. I know it's a busy time of the year. So much going on. I know there's no game tonight, which is maybe why a lot of you are here. I don't know about you, but I've been watching the game every night. The games, the Nationals, and gosh, let's just pray that they pull it out tomorrow night, right? So there's a bunch of meetings going on in the city. In fact, our two officials I'm about to introduce just came from a city schools meeting. So I just want to say, first of all, thanks to all of you for making yourselves available. This is an all-woman panel, and I'm very, very happy about that. This doesn't happen very often, and it was on purpose too, I will say. But it's always great to have all different voices. So let me start out first of all by saying I want to say a couple of thanks before I introduce our panelists. I want to say a big thanks to my program co-chair, Ricardo Alfaro. Thank you so much, Ricardo, for all your help. I also want to thank my friend Michael Pope. Where are you? I saw you out there. Thank you, Michael. And I also want to acknowledge some officials that are here, some past and present. I think I saw Michelle Reif. Hi, Michelle. Michelle's on the Alexandria City School Board. Thank you for being here. Wonderful, thank you. I see my old colleague, when I say old, my former colleague, Arthur Peabody. Arthur and I both served together on the Alexandria City School Board. Seems like a long, long time ago. Henry Brooks as well. I know you also served. Thank you, Henry. Did I miss anyone?
Mark Eaton.
Mark Eaton, there you are. Excuse me. Hi, Mark. Hello. Thank you. Hi, Mark. Mark as well. I just said hello to Mark. Thank you very much. Tiffany Pash, who is from the ACPS Communications Office, is here. Thank you for all your help. Okay, great. Well, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists this evening. And we're very lucky to have two leaders and two students to give us some great perspectives on tonight's conversation, which is all about a topic that when we polled a lot of the members, folks that are involved with Agenda Alexandria this past spring, this was one of the most important topics that rose to the top. A lot of folks wanted to learn about what was happening in our city, knowing that a lot of what we're reading about, we see that there's some issues regarding more students than we've probably ever seen in our city, and the growing amount of kids that are going to our high school. And we have two students here that are going to talk firsthand about their experiences, so we're very lucky. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to my left Ms. Mignon Anthony. Ms. Anthony is the Chief Operating Officer of ACPS, and she's been in and around the city for a while, since the 80s, and has had two grandchildren that have graduated, and you also have one as well, who's in what, 5th grade, you said? Yep. And your daughter also works at ACPS, right? And so you bring a lot of great knowledge and a lot of great experience. You've been working in business, in development, and so you've been with the school system now for what, 2 years? Yes. Wonderful. Came from Philadelphia University with a bachelor's in business management and a graduate in organizational change and development from my alma mater as well, American University. So we're very lucky to have you, Ms. Anthony. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So my far right is Dr. Mozingo, Dr. Terri Mozingo. Thank you as well for being here, Terri. Terri is the Chief Academic Officer of ACPS. Comes to us from North Carolina. And I understand, Dr. Mozingo, that your husband is still living in North Carolina, but you're hoping one of these days, soon, he'll join you here.
Yes.
And you come from Chapel Hill. Wonderful. And have a bachelor's from Fayetteville State, and you've also earned a master's in instruction and curriculum from North Carolina State. And you have a doctoral in educational leadership from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which is very beautiful. So you've been a teacher, you've been an assistant principal, and an assistant superintendent. So lots of great experience. Okay, thank you so much for being here. All right, now to my immediate right is Mikaela Pozo. So great to have you here, Mikaela. Thank you so much. You're a native of Bolivia.
Yeah, I am.
Wonderful. How long have you been in this country for?
I've been here for 9 years, so
Right.
a lot, I guess, majority of my life.
Yeah. You've been to MacArthur, you went to GW, and now you're a junior at TC.
I'm a senior.
Senior, sorry, I got that part right. A senior. Great. And you're also pretty busy, not only being in your last year of high school, you started a group called Operation Integration, which advocates for educational justice and immigrant rights. Thank you. Well, we're going to hear a lot about that tonight, I'm sure. And you've also been active politically in the city. You interned with our now Vice Mayor, Elizabeth Bennett Parker, so that's fantastic. Thank you. And you also have been involved with the school board.
To an extent, yeah. I did campaigning for Chris Suarez, who is now the school board. But yeah, so I'm very involved with the school board to some extent.
Great, thank you. And last but not least, Bridgette, how are you? Thank you so much for being here. Bridgette Adu-Wadier, you're from New York City?
Yeah.
What part?
From Bronx.
The Bronx, that's right, that's where my husband's from. All right, yeah, I got the Bronx attitude. Right, okay. And you moved to Alexandria as a child. How old were you when you moved?
I was about 1.
Wow, okay. You went to Pope, Hammond, and now you are a junior at TC. You write for the Theogony, and you also write for the Gazette Packet, which is how I think you know our friend Mr. Pope.
Yeah.
And you've been doing a lot of reporting about the overcrowding situation, and you've been part of PBS, and you've also hosted a local news talk show called Behind the Headlines.
Yeah, that has been a lot of fun.
That's been a lot of fun, I'm sure. Well, we're gonna hear about that too. All right, so before I get started, I know there will be questions that you will have, and so just when we sort of wrap up, wave your hand, and Ricardo and others, Michael, will get your questions, and we'll make sure we get them addressed. So I'm going to start off with some questions that I've been working on. As you can imagine, there's a lot of interest in this topic, and so it's timely in that just last month, for those of you I'm sure who have been paying attention, and that's why you're probably here, the ACPS school board voted 6-3 to expand the high school and into something that has been referred to as a connected high school network. And so what I wanted to do is first start the questions off by asking both, I'm going to start with Ms. Anthony and talk a little bit about this decision and how this decision came about, because I know there was a lot of conversation. I can tell you just from being and living here in the city, there were a lot of meetings. I know I went to a few earlier this year. There's been a lot of group community conversations, so there's been no lack, I think, of community conversation about it, but nonetheless, the decision was made, and I know it wasn't a unanimous decision. I was not able to be at the meeting, but I watched it from my home. I was watching on closed caption TV, right? And I listened to a lot of the conversation. It was very interesting. And the decision was not to build another high school, but to instead create a network. And I wanted to just sort of, for everyone's just knowledge, so we can all kind of start in the same place. If you could just for a little bit, Ms. Anthony, talk to us, how did this option become how did this option, in your opinion, become the winning option?
Thank you, Eileen, and I'm going to tag team a little bit with Dr. Mozingo, because we have a really interdisciplinary team with regard to this program, because there are several lanes, we call them lanes of work. Some have to do with the space, some have to do with the educational program, and we talked a lot about how a decision or how the recommendations might be driven by what we think the educational needs are, and how the description of that drives what kind of space you build, what kind of high school you build. So they are connected to each other. And specifically, to answer your question, the options, both options of 2 high schools or this expansion of TC into multiple buildings were really developed to address the overcrowding issue. Either or both of them would have addressed overcrowding. The issue, though, was really for us the time frame. You know, several years ago with the task force, there was a commitment by the city council and by the school board to try to address overcrowding within a particular time frame, because this has been a discussion for some time. And the enrollment projections, the projection that there was going to be this significant increase in student growth has not really backed up. It's really accelerated. So the opportunity to look at a model or a structure that would meet the time frame for that commitment, and also the other thing I guess I want to say about it is that we don't feel that a second high school is necessarily this doesn't preclude that at some point Alexandria may decide they still think that a second high school is needed. So the first thing is, you know, use the assets that we have, expand the high school that we have. We know that it would take a lot of time to address how do you develop a second high school, how do you create a whole nother institution. And so those are the types of things that were discussed and that came about as we talked about the Connected High School Network. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means in a second. Dr. Mozingo?
Thank you. So I think that what we actually believe in as a chief academic officer for Alexandria City Public Schools, now that the board has made the decision, we really feel like we're in a place that we can go forward. And what we mean by that is that we believe that the Connected High School Network will provide our students multiple and specialized and personalized opportunities. We'll talk later and give you some examples of those, but we really do feel as though that this model will afford an opportunity for students to be able to just achieve many more opportunities than they're achieving now. And we'll tell you more about that shortly.
So thank you, and we're going to talk a little bit about, so we can all kind of visualize what does this connected high school mean, because I don't know about you, but I can say I remember going to a school when I went to high school. It had 4 walls, right? It was one building, but it was in a very different time. So Bridgette and Mikaela, can you share with us a little bit about, I know you're at the end of your high school experience. Talk to us a little bit about what you've experienced over the last couple of years, what you've seen, and how do you feel about the decision?
I guess the most obvious thing that we could talk about is the overcrowding and how evident it is. Like, it is kind of a safety hazard because there's so many kids. Recently we had a incident with, I think it was like a gas exhaust, I'm not exactly sure, but we had a not fire drill, but we had to evacuate the school, and just that incident just kind of brought up some of those issues that we've been having for so long in terms of safety and overcrowding. So I definitely have seen that. I definitely agree with the connected school model. I was actually at the school board in support of it. I spoke for option B of the connected school model because I think it's the better option, and it ensures that there wouldn't be segregation, that there would be more equity, because I feel like we already have a lot of issues in TC and ACPS in terms of equity and allocation of resources. So I think this is our way. It would be a lot easier to kind of address those issues if we have one school instead of 2 schools. So that would be my.
Yeah, I kind of share the same experience as Mikaela. I agree with a lot of what she says, and also it was really interesting because the 9th graders, their high school experience is pretty different now, that they're pretty isolated from the main campus at TC. For those of you who don't know, there's Mini Howard for the 9th graders and the TC main campus for the sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And, you know, as a freshman, when you're first entering high school, you know, it's kind of pivotal to be with the other kids and, you know, kind of know what high school is all about, but you're kind of isolated in this building with hundreds of other kids. And then when you move into your sophomore year, it's just a really disturbing transition there, because you kind of feel like a freshman again in your sophomore year because it's your first time in the main building. Another thing is the busing of the 9th graders to the main campus that happens multiple times throughout the day, and that is also like a key aspect that has been a result of the overcrowding. And a result of that is then that a lot of 9th graders, a few of them do get to experience the main campus, but several of them don't. And I've seen that with my French class. So for example, the sophomores who are taking French 4, for example, don't really have that experience of going into the trailers and those outside classrooms because they've been inside the building for their 9th grade year taking foreign languages inside. So it's just been a really pivotal transition for a lot of students.
Thank you, Bridgette. I'm going to talk a little bit about the current situation, because that's a good segue to a question that I have. But before I move on, I'm remiss if I didn't also acknowledge another important ACPS leader here, and that's Patty Moran, who was in the back there, and I didn't get a chance to recognize her, but thank you, Patty. I saw you come in, and by the way, yes, I should have called Pete, Mr. Ballas, the principal. I know he's a little busy tonight with the PTA meeting, but maybe we'll do part 2 of this when he can join us. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, first of all, before we move on, I got a show of hands, if you wouldn't mind, in the audience. How many of you currently have students or children that are in ACPS? 1, 2, 3, okay, great. How many of you have children that graduated from ACPS? Okay, wow, wonderful, perfect, okay. So you're watching all of us, for those of you who just put your hands up that had children who've graduated and moved on. This is a very different time, right? And so, you know, for those of us who drive past King Street and see what's going on, you know, I remember back in 2007, my colleague Arthur Peabody and we cut the ribbon at the new TC. And it was an exciting time, and at the time we were like, wow, this is a big building. And it was built for around, what, 2,700 to 2,900 students, as I understand. And my understanding is that we're way past that at this point. We're around over 3,000 students, if I'm not mistaken. And the projections are that by 2025, which is just 5-6 years away, there will be well over 5,000 students. So I'm going to get into kind of what's driving this population growth. I want to get into that in a minute, but before I get there, I want to talk about like what's going on now. Ms. Anthony, I know that you weren't with the school system when the plans were drawn up for the new TC, but nonetheless, you know, here we are looking at the next phase. So how are students and teachers coping now? How are they, you know, right now, and knowing that we're way beyond capacity, how are they coping with it, and how is learning and teaching affected?
Well, again, we're going to tag team because Dr. Mozingo is the academic specialist. I will just say physically, I want to make sure that people know that within the classrooms, the classroom sizes are still according to our standards. There's 25 kids in the class. There aren't. Most jurisdictions say overcrowding. One thinks of a class with 35 children in it, like in some other jurisdictions in the metropolitan area. So we are maintaining the class sizes that we are supposed to maintain within ACPS. But the hallways are crowded. When we say crowded, it's like a sea of young people, but they're moving around, and Dr. Mozingo goes to the schools. We all do, all the time. As was mentioned by the other students, the King Street, very modern and beautiful, and Minnie Howard we started using Minnie Howard. There's 800 ninth graders at Minnie Howard. And the new approach that we'll use for the expanded high school, the first thing it'll do will be to look at that population of students all together, 9th through 12th grade, not a separate campus for 9th graders and a separate campus for the others, and redetermine how the classes and the courses and the programs will be organized so that they can share. The space has to actually feel like one, because it has to feel like there's one school. Dr. Mozingo, you have anything to add to that?
I got this right. Thanks. Yes, a couple of things I'd like to say is, as you mentioned, one of the strategies that I have is I visit a lot of schools. And this year I've started something that's titled Principal Walk and Talk. So I go to the school, I integrate with the principal and just fill his or her shoes by just shadowing the principal around. So I had the opportunity to visit T.C. Williams about 2 weeks ago, unannounced in one sense, and Pete and I, we had a chance to tour the entire facility, and I was, you know, like you said, students in high schools all over the United States, what happens when they transition from one class to the other, and I observed the students just move quietly. Of course, they chat along, because the first time they can really chat between class, so they were chatting as they were in the halls. But what I also noticed, and what that leadership has done there along with his teachers and assistant principals, is I was able to peep in on several classes, and I was actually amazed at the level of interaction, the level of group work, just the way in which the students were engaged during this particular visit, during this particular opportunity. What we also know is that one of the things you'll learn a little bit more about that, but we did form an educational design team. Mark, Mr. Eaton was on that team, and that team gave us a lot of ideas for what could be possible in this high school. We are in the midst of forming an expanded educational design team. As a part of that, we will organize an esteemed group of researchers, and those researchers will give us more feedback on really how to truly make that an innovative and an exciting and very unique program given the space. So we're looking forward to this panel of experts that will provide us a lot of advice. At the same time, the board has charged us with making sure that the community is engaged. There will be a tremendous amount of community input, whether it's families, whether it's former Titans or current Titans or future Titans. There will be a lot of engagement to make sure that we, again, go forward and that we build upon what is already occurring at T.C. Williams. They have engaged in a model that's called Kagan, and the Kagan model is one that totally different from what schools looked like in 2007 classrooms, but a lot of interaction and hands-on and problem solving and communication. So we are really committed, working with a number of individuals to really moving forward with an exciting educational innovative program for T.C. Williams.
Can I add one thing? From a space standpoint too, one of the challenges to your question is that teachers don't have enough of their own planning spaces. Those are one of the coping issues that you're talking about, or the fact that teachers have to move around with their mobile units. They don't necessarily have a solid space. But to Dr. Mozingo's point, one of the challenges that we have is looking at the future. You know, what does technology bring, and are all of those physical spaces necessary? In some cases, yes, because there's nothing that takes the place of real in-person, hands-on working area when it comes to teacher space and student collaboration space. So those are the types of things that are really sorely, woefully diminished at TC. There are common spaces for kids, but not necessarily enough spaces to do all of the things that academics really is looking for in terms of student, teacher, collaborative space, and planning spaces, in-person planning spaces.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's a challenging environment, and I can imagine as a teacher trying to figure out where you're going to put together your lesson plans and preparing for the demands in an environment that is very challenging. But as students, talk to us a little bit. Bridgette, talk to us a little bit about what is it like? I mean, is it as tough as you've heard? Tell us, like, help us imagine what it's like.
So, at least for extracurriculars, like you said, a lot of teachers don't have their own offices to plan, but also after school, since like 2 or 3 teachers are sharing one classroom, and if one teacher sponsors a club, there's no guarantee that that teacher will be there and you'll be able to have that club or activity, because another teacher might be staying after school, or 2 other teachers might be staying after school and then helping out students. So there is an impact on student opportunities to do activities after school and seek help. There isn't always that constant availability with that one teacher. Also, with the new increase with students coming in, we've also had to hire more teachers. I think TC hired over 200 teachers, or ACPS hired over 200 teachers.
This year?
Yeah, this year, and there was like training for them to welcome them and everything. But then again, the number of classrooms has not grown with those teachers. So again, you have that period where it's a little confusing, because your teacher's not always going to be there every period. So if we want to visit them, you don't know where to find them. Yeah, you don't know where to find them. I mean, they have like a paper of where they might be, but again, they might be in the lounge, they might be elsewhere. It's just a little unreliable of not always having them there in this one place and being able to go to them. Also, like in one of my classes, for instance, we've had an overcrowding issue there. The TC newspaper, The Ogany, has grown to nearly 40 students. And we have one small lab, and it gets pretty chaotic in there, pretty hectic, of multiple people, in there at a time, over 30 people in there, trying to work on the IMAX and, get articles in. So, yeah, just working in that constant environment of all these people, in the same room, and, the constant chatter. I mean, obviously it's not distracting, but then again, it's an environment that you get used to, and is something that is normal to you, and something that you can't really ever imagine is part of the TC experience.
All right, go back to just a second. So I know that we haven't yet gotten to the actual description of what exactly, we should have probably brought like a picture or something to help us visualize it. We're gonna get to that in just a minute. We're gonna actually have Dr. Mozingo and Ms. Anthony describe what is this actually going to look like. But before we do that, I just want to take a little bit of a step back and kind of help understand, how did we get here? Because I think that, for me at least, is very interesting, is where have we seen the greatest surges in population? Like where are these kids coming from? What parts of the city are growing the fastest? And I'm just wondering if either of you could answer that question.
Well, Alexandria has been growing in student population since about 2012, and the kindergartners that were, born around that time, it was the largest. There's not one particular area. I mean, I think the west side and the central side of Alexandria has the most population growth in terms of our projections. But I think even that is changing now because of the economic development that the city is projecting. And of course the city and different other projects around town are driving development in other areas, where Alexandria was very conservative in its housing and its growth population. It's a yin-yang type of situation. So the school district has just been really trying to respond to where all of our schools are overcrowded now. There were some that weren't as overcrowded 5 years ago, that all of our schools, all of our elementary schools, both of our middle schools, our K through 8 schools, they're all overutilized right now. So I don't think, I think that it's not it's one part of town or another part of town. We have to look at a comprehensive solution for all of them. In addition to facilities and operations, I also manage the food and nutrition program, the safety and security program, and the transportation program. And We have children, we have overcapacity when there's more than 24 kids in a class in certain parts of town. We've got 300 kids right now who are not going to their neighborhood school, and they're being transported to other parts of Alexandria because of overcapacity across the city.
Anything you wanted to add to that? Yeah, okay. So let's get into now. I've got some other questions, but I think there's enough of an appetite, right? Let's just kind of help us visualize how exactly will this connected high school network work? And if you could kind of give us a timeline, kind of like when is it going to begin, and what changes can we expect? And perhaps maybe in your senior year, will you see any changes? Bridgette, would you see any changes? But let's start, why don't you give us, because you've been reporting on this, so why don't you give us a good journalistic overview of what you've been reporting on?
So I've been reporting on the high school project since the beginning of last year when it was first, being publicized. As for whether or not I think anything will be seen next year, I don't think so. I think a lot of people in my graduating class don't think that the high school project is something that, is for them. I feel like I've looked at a lot of reports, and I feel like a lot of the things are 2022 and beyond, if I'm not wrong. And we'll be out of the school system by then, but I feel like the long-term impacts are especially interesting for me because I have 3 younger siblings and they're coming up in the school system. So I think I'll definitely hear about the impacts of the high school project from their perspective, and it would be definitely interesting to hear about T.C. Williams in the 2020s, as well as just how the school is going to change, with these proceedings. We voted for this one option, we're going to keep TC together. What is that going to look like in the future? I'll be very interested to cover that next year and in the coming months.
So talk to us about what's going to change this year, and when will the actual network be in place, and how will it look like, and what other buildings around the city will be utilized as part of this connected high school network?
Well, I'll start by saying that the concept of the connected high school network was envisioned with our original consultants about 1.5 years ago, Fielding Nair International, which is an international education consultant who we engaged to look around the country at cities that had similarities to Alexandria demographically or size-wise, and or who had only one high school. And what did they do when they had a capacity problem? And at the time, we were looking at multiple sites around the city, and the idea of the connected high school network was, first of all, being connected to your community, and that the school is connected together, whether it's by educational themes, whether it's by operations or whatever, and network just keeping up with the idea of technology, is that you can learn from anywhere. And we currently have a satellite program that a lot of people don't know. There are 2 schools that are not in TC physically. Our satellite program, which is actually housed at central office, our Chance for Change program, which is an alternate education program, which is housed in downtown Alexandria. And so, knowing that those students work from those locations, the board, asked us to make sure that we looked at proximity, make sure that students, wherever they're learning, feel like they're, that they are part of one school, and that's our challenge.
I think that in some ways it's so exciting in some ways. I think that the opportunity that is before us is an exciting opportunity, and the reason I say that is because the next step in the process is that we are forming an expanded educational design team. What is unique about this expanded educational design team is that, again, it's going to include students and teachers and administrators and lots of input, as I said earlier, from families in the community. In addition to that, what will make this model so unique is that we have also formed industry advisory boards. And for years and years and years, school systems have had difficulty with students when they graduate from high school, how we ensure that they have multiple opportunities for clinical rotations, clinical trials, job shadowing opportunities, externships, internships. So a decision has been made to form 4 industry advisory boards. One for STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics, business and government, education and human services, and the arts. What is unique about that is that they will be chaired and co-chaired by individuals who work or reside within the community. What will come out of that, and some of this is really hard to sort of describe just yet, mainly because those industry advisory boards will help us define and describe and create what is possible for students going forward. What it could look like is that eventually every student that leaves T.C. Williams would have a viable experience and opportunity within an industry. That would be absolutely fascinating. We know that there is some possible legislation that will require that. What will happen is that our community will be in a position that we've made those connections and collaborations for our students. The difficulty is always trying to provide meaningful experiences for high school students. So we see that that is going to be certainly an opportunity. In addition to that, TC has some excellent programs now. You know that it offers over 400 courses. We have a health medical science program there. We have a STEM program. We have a finance academy. There's so many educational opportunities, but there will be even more opportunities as we move forward with designing this particular model. In addition to that, as I said earlier, the researchers that will work with us, one, for example, has done a study of over 100 high schools and what makes those high schools promising. What will be unique again is that it won't be the central office, it will be the parents and the community and students together really crafting and designing opportunities for students. So I think that, I think what's also fascinating is students, it will reduce the overcrowding because there will be more opportunities as students go out in the community. And so as students are out in the community with those field-based experiences, that does reduce the population that is at the main campus.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So obviously we're doing something right in Alexandria.
Yes, we're doing something right.
We've got a fantastic selection of choices and over 400 courses, and with these 4 areas. So I'm still trying to figure out, so I'm thinking about, let's just say in 2021, 2022, a student starts and enrolls at TC. Can you kind of help us envision, like, what amount of their time would you think, and it may be premature and push back if you want, but like, what percentage of their time will actually be physically either in the building, or how much of it will be perhaps outside? And because I think what people, at least I know folks that I've talked to, they're trying to figure out, like, where are we going to put all these kids, right? Where are we going to put all the students? Where's the room? Where are we going to make room for them, and how are we going to get them there? So
I'll say a little bit of that. I'll answer your question first, and I want to make sure I clarify what we're working with now, what the board has instructed us to do. We're looking at our schedule. Some of the accommodation of crowding in many other cities around the country is they stagger their schedule. That brings with it a lot of other challenges, but there are issues that we need to look at for the immediate, for the next 4 years, because the new schools, the physical locations won't open until September of 2024. So it takes about 2 years to both physically design the programs that are going to go in, and then about 2 years, those of you who know how long it takes to build something, about 2 years to construct it. And so we've been asked to build out the school on the fields of the mini Howard campus. And while the students stay in the mini Howard building now, and the new building, the idea is that there will be a new building there. and that after probably the year before, the 9th graders start to integrate with the rest of the school system, and we'll know what courses are going to be in which building, and they'll be assigned whether specialty or core classes or whatever. All of that will be determined as part of the educational design team's work. So there's a lot of, there are a lot of balls that'll be juggling between keeping the overcrowding over the next 3 or 4 years and then occupying the new spaces as they come alive.
Mikaela, does that sound confusing to you? Or do you think that kids today are more resilient than us old people, and that doesn't seem like it's going to be all that confusing? I mean, it seems like there's going to be, it's going to try to figure out where do I go and how do I get there, but I'm sure that's going to be part of what's being thought out, and it just seems like it's going to be a lot of change management, huh?
For sure. I think I just have a concern with the, I guess like the kind of like categorizing students into specific groups. I think that was one of my main concerns with the 2-school model, was the fact that one was STEM and one was humanities, because I think because of it, it will cause a lack of diversity. How would you ensure that we maintain diversity when we have very specific schools that are STEM, humanities, arts, when, like STEM classes, and usually the STEM field as a whole is very predominantly white and male. So how would you ensure that there is diversity?
So one of the ways that we would need to be able to do that is through counseling from our counselors and advisement. The other is, and we haven't made any final decisions just yet about the actual program. I want to definitely clarify that. We still are in the beginning stages. The board just engaged in an activity last week where they did a kind of a dot exercise, and they identified some big themes for this education design team to consider as they begin to develop and design the program. What we are seeing, though, we have in Alexandria a STEM, an elementary, we have 2 elementary schools that are already STEM schools, and kind of there's a pipeline there. So a part of this too is also trying to provide pipeline opportunities for students. But to go back to your question, what we really would want to be able to do is student interest. That matters, student interest, and students to be able to have some interest in courses and programs. Secondly, we want to be able to continue to use our counselors that are at the high school or the middle schools to be able to help advise students and families. I think the other opportunity is, we've had some families actually just to contact us recently about the opportunity to just to come in and shadow and visit the school and just sort of learn for themselves. So those are some of the ways that we would want to monitor that. I hope that's helpful.
Certainly. I guess I have a follow-up question. Yeah, so you do want to consider student interest, which makes sense. I guess my question would be, how would you incorporate the students from the International Academy in this? Because a lot of the classes that they take are very specialized to them. They're not the classes that everybody else from who isn't in the International Academy takes. So how would you ensure that they have the opportunity to have access to these programs when they're also learning a new language and they're also learning how to assimilate into the culture? So there's a lot of things that they need to think about. So how would you want to incorporate?
So Mikaela, thank you for that question, and Dr. Mozingo, before you answer, I just want to make sure for the audience's benefit. So the International Academy, I don't know, for those of you who don't know what it is, International Academy is an academy within the high school that is specifically designed to help immigrant students who come to the city, and there's a whole curriculum that's been put together to help the students who come from all different parts of the world, who are coming to the United States for the first time, and who are learning a new language and are learning a lot of things. And it is something that I know is very attractive to a lot of folks that are coming to the United States and are looking for a school system that'll be welcoming and will help their children become assimilated as well as themselves. So I just wanted to make sure the audience understood that, because I don't know if a lot of people knew about that academy. And before, Dr. Mozingo, you answer that question, I just want to factor, if you could, into your response is that, well, we know that we've had this huge surge in students. What I want to get an understanding of is what percentage of students in Alexandria go to our public schools, because I think that there's obviously overcrowding probably going on as well at our private schools. But we're here tonight to talk about our public schools. But I just want to see, Dr. Mozingo, if you have any statistics around that. As do you know how many? If you look at the breakdown of students in Alexandria, how many of them now go to ACPS? Yeah.
As most of you know, most of the demographics of Alexandria do not have children in the public school, or don't have school-age children, I'll put it that way. Of the students that are in Alexandria Public School, of the students that are in the school-age children, I think something like 60% go to Alexandria City Public Schools of the school-age children.
Small percentage of the school-age children,
Right.
that's correct.
So I know your question was about the International Academy, and that'd be great for us to learn a little bit about how will this Connected High School network either impact, or will it harm? Will it affect this academy that it seems to be a very popular destination for students and for their families?
Well, I thank you for that description of
Yep.
the International Academy. There are approximately 800 students currently in the International Academy, and during the freshman and sophomore year, those students are required to remain within the academy because they're building, as you indicated, their language and content skills. But as juniors and seniors, they can actually take courses outside of the academy. So they can take courses. We have some of the students in the International Academy that are in our advanced placement program. We have, many of those students are also taking our career and technical education courses. At the same time, those students, like all the other students, will have and do have that opportunity for those field-based experiences. We will be, one of the goals of this as we go forward is to pull the data to get a sense of the mobility, the number of students that are in the International Academy that participate in other courses outside of the academy. But the freshman and sophomore year, they are in the academy, a small group of teachers located in a part of the facility, building their language and content skills. But they can't participate because all students are required to meet certain graduation requirements. And with the International Academy, there are many graduation requirements that they can meet within the academy, but there are some graduation requirements and courses that they can have access to. I would also see that they would want to and should be able to have a lot of those field-based experiences as juniors and seniors.
Can I just talk about something to your point? I feel like you're saying that they do have access to these courses, which I think is ideal and they should. But I think there is a disconnect with that because there is a lack of students from the International Academy who take advanced courses. In fact, the only class I've ever had a student from the International Academy was a Spanish class that I took because they were Spanish-speaking students. In fact, with the students who I have talked from the International Academy, they've told me the difficulty that it comes when trying to take classes that are more advanced. They're kind of discouraged from taking advanced classes, which should not be the case. I think we're trying to encourage them to take more advanced classes, but I feel like because of the fact that they might not be proficient in English, they somehow, there's kind of this, I guess we equate the fact that they're not knowledgeable enough to be able to take any harder classes, which is certainly not the case, especially when a lot of these students have a lot of previous schooling. So I don't know why there's that disconnect.
Well, I think that goes back to the access to the counselors, the level of counseling, and that's something that we need to continue to work on, and we are going to continue to work on that. There is a commitment to that. We have participated in some focus groups with students from the International Academy, and so that's a commitment on our part to make sure that we are providing those access and those opportunities, particularly after they have become proficient with the English language. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Yeah, and what Mikaela said about the international students really does lead to a larger conversation concerning equity and adequate access within the school system at large. I think, Mignon, you said that most of the population growth is occurring on the west end and in central Alexandria. You know, that's where we get most of our minority kids and immigrant kids and children of color, of course. And CC is a majority minority school in which, you know, about 60% of the students at, I think ACPS in general, identify as either Hispanic or African American. And I think as we, you know, approach this connected high school model, we really do have to consider what equity is going to look like in the future. You know, ACPS recently came out with this racial equity audit based on a survey that they did last school year from 2018 to 2019. And they found that there's still some implicit bias that exists, a lot of stuff that they still need to work on. And again, it's just a matter of, you know, what equity is going to look like in the future, given this decision that they voted for. And actually, I don't think the audience knows what the second option was. You briefly mentioned it.
Yeah.
But it was the second high school, the two comprehensive high schools that were divided between sciences, engineering, mathematics, and technology, and then the humanities and the arts. And that was particularly controversial because a lot of people felt that it would cause division within our city, it would cause a lot of rivalry and inequity in resources and allocation. And it was just very interesting on that September school board meeting to see the very palpable divide between the students and their parents who supported one high school versus the adults who did not have school-age children and preferred the second high school. And one thing that I found particularly interesting was what school board member Michelle Reef said about the second high school, was that that one day we're going to need one because it'll be difficult to adjust for the recession that may come, and it will be difficult to account for the money that would be needed, and it would be more expensive to build a second high school and whatnot. And I think that was particularly interesting because, you know, the Connected High School Network, you know, it's built for 5,000 kids. And again, once we account for the equity in the programming and whatnot, I feel like we have to approach this from like an evolutionary perspective. You know, this is not set in stone. What's going to happen in 10 years when perhaps the economy is going to change, perhaps rebuilding or updating the school system is going to be a lot more expensive than, you know, what happens. Of course, you know, those questions aren't, I don't expect you to have answers to those questions, of course.
Yeah.
But it's just something that we need to consider as of right now when we're approaching equity with the expanded high school.
Yeah. No, thank you for giving the audience a little more description about the choices that the school board were deciding between. And so, yes, basically there were two options, right? There was one to build a second high school, and the second option was to create this Connected High School Network. And the Connected High School Network was the prevailing vote. It was not unanimous. It was a 6-3 vote, as I said at the beginning, and I know for those of you like myself who did listen in, there was a lot of very, very interesting discussion about this very topic of equity. And how do we ensure that this model will ensure that every student succeeds, which I know is the motto of ACPS. I'm going to get back to that in a minute, and I do have a whole bunch of questions about that. But I just want to talk, if I were, for those who are in the audience and who are thinking, and those who do have, you know, elementary or middle school age children, talk to us. What would be a typical day be like for, let's just say, a student that's starting out at TC in this new Connected High School model? What would it look like? How would it feel, and how would we describe it to someone who's thinking about moving here and thinking, my student, my son or my daughter is going to be going to high school in 2024, and I want to make a decision on whether or not I want to move to Alexandria, or move to Arlington or someplace else. Help me understand what my child will be dealing with and what will their day look like in a high school, in this new Connected High School Network.
I'm going to take some of my colleagues off the hook a little bit to, first of all, remind us that we're in the infancy stages of developing a program as it relates to what class do I have in period 1, what class do I have in period 2. But I will tell you that a very important element of this is to ensure that the students are going to a school building, and they're not going between school buildings on an everyday basis, that we are developing schedules and courses and programs where we can look at, scheduling is going to be a lot of this, whether it's A-B day, whether it's A day, B day, blue day, red day. We know that technology is going to play a huge role. I think right now it's impossible or I guess it is possible for all of us to understand that going to school now and the technology associated with virtual classrooms and with how you take classrooms, it's not going to be as it is now. And I will say, as somebody who's been developing physical environments for more than 25 years, that the last 10 years has been about how flexible can you create space so that it can be used for more than one thing. So that just because you build a lab in the building that's at King Street or that's at the Minnie Howard campus doesn't mean that it's only going to be able to be used as a wet lab. Maybe it could be used as a physics lab. Maybe it could be used as a culinary space. And so what my responsibility is ensuring that I listen very carefully to the students, to the programs, to the researchers that are thinking about how to use the space. At this point, there's been a lot of discussion about the TC campus being the core campus, being the home campus, being where all of your basic math, English, those types of classes always are. And maybe one of the other campuses will house the specialty and advanced and other classes that any student from 9 through 12 could take depending upon their curriculum. And that they're not necessarily, remember everyone has graduation credits. So I would be reminded over and over again that remember that they have to take credits that are going to make them become graduates, but that we may, the educators may decide to designate certain areas of maybe the new building or buildings in a way that those are where you go to take certain level or certain classes for different types of programs. You're not necessarily stuck in one pathway to take one particular program. So I guess I just want to say that they're going to have an exciting experience, but we don't exactly know how the courses and classes are going to be placed and where they're going to be placed yet. But the thinking at this point is at least we know that King Street, and one more thing I want to say, the Connected High School Network, it's a name. It's really T.C. Williams High School, and it's an expanded, it's expanded campuses. And so that's a model that there are some schools, systems around the country have it's like a combination of things that we've seen around the country.
Could you name, I know you all have done a lot of research, what other cities around the country have implemented this kind of model, and what have the results been like?
There haven't been too many that we can find that have adopted a high school that is on multiple campuses that are in different parts of the city, which is one reason why I think the school board felt like, let's keep it close, if we're going to do this. I think the other thing has to do with this issue of equity. Our core values are about graduating students. I'm speaking a little bit out of turn for the academicians, but graduating students that, the core values for the high school project are the community connectedness, that a connection to the community and to the world is absolutely fundamental, that our diversity is our strength, that we have a lot of kids from all over the country and from diverse backgrounds. Let's use that not only for the children who are immigrants, but for the world, for the global citizens that we want to graduate, and experiential learning.
So before we get to the academic part, and I want Dr. Mozingo to talk about that, because a lot of the questions that I've gotten from a lot of you here in the audience, as well as my own, is that there's going to be a lot more choices and a lot more opportunity, and to me that sounds like students will be better prepared to go on to college or onto a vocation or to whatever they choose to do after high school. I know that that there's been a very big emphasis on preparing kids for college, but I can tell you from raising 2 sons and a daughter, not everyone's ready, and not everybody is cut out to go to college. So I know that there's going to be an emphasis on not necessarily preparing kids for college, but for vocations. But before we get to the academic part, there's a lot of questions that I got in front of me, which is one of mine, is how many buildings or sites do we think we're going to need beyond the main TC campus and the, what I call the mini Howard campus? How many other sites do you think we're going to need to either redevelop or create other sites around, like, if you could just sort of, like, how many more do you think we're gonna need, or do you know yet?
You're gonna get me in trouble. I'm not gonna answer that question. No, I mean, we're maximizing the mini Howard site, and we had originally proposed, well, the superintendent and one of the models that we proposed included the mini Howard site and a site in Potomac Yards, where the school district has a school site in Potomac Yards. There are about 4 other sites in the cities that you can build schools on, but we need elementary schools and we need middle schools.
How many more elementary schools do you think we need?
We're right now budgeted for the replacement of George Mason and Cora Kelly, but additional elementary schools will be really dependent upon the economic development in the city. We've been asked to look at potentially 2 over the next 10 to 15 years. And so those are planning issues that we're trying to assess right now.
Any more middle schools?
Middle school, there's a slot for middle school in the 10-year program.
By the way, I just saw another school board member in the audience, a former school board member, Cheryl Gorsuch. Welcome. Thank you. By the way, is Ricardo or Michael walking around anywhere, or do they pop out and go home? Oh, there you are. Oh, hi, questions. There you are. You're behind the curtain. There's some more questions down there. I'm going to make you work some more. Okay. Dr. Mozingo, talk to us a little bit about these, as I was doing my research about this new network, that there will be 16 new areas. Did I get that right? That there will be 16 areas that, the areas of study. And I wanted you to sort of talk a little bit about that. I know that that's obviously still being in the design phase, but the question I really have is, like, at the end of the day, when this network is thought through and is designed, my question is how much better will our students who are graduating from the new connected high school network in Alexandria be prepared than our neighbors in Arlington and Fairfax and Falls Church?
That's a great question. Okay. I kind of want to take off from what Mignon indicated. I think that you asked that question earlier about the kind of the experience of the student. It's still, and it's, what's so difficult is that we are in the beginning stage of this, but I can tell you what I think we foresee. First, we know that, again, we have the Virginia profile of the graduate, which illustrates that students are required to meet so many graduation requirements, whether in literacy or math or science or whatever, the career technical education. So every student will still be required to take those core subjects. Now, no decision has been made yet in terms of where those core subjects will be offered, but we know that students will be required to take those core subjects. In addition to that, currently, one major difference is this. We offer a career and technical education program. Not every student participates in all aspects of that particular program. With this new legislation, what will happen is that when students graduate from high school, they will need to have some type of, as I mentioned earlier, some type of field experience. Why is that unique? Number one, we have all over the nation, I think there are a number of students that graduate from high school. Let's say they go into the workplace. And the workplace employers are basically indicating that we want to make sure they have strong communication skills. We want to make sure that they can work in teams. We want to make sure that they have strong problem-solving skills. What will happen again with those industry advisory boards and the potential for every student to have some type of experience, that is going to make us extremely unique in terms of our students graduating from T.C. Williams. I think also what will make this unique is that we want students to be able to go to colleges and universities, but when Dr. Hutchins did his listening and learning tour, he also heard that there were families who would like for their students to go directly to a community college, go directly to the workforce. Again, by having those partnerships and those connections, more of our students will have those types of opportunities. I think the other opportunity that we have that's just kind of inherent, and it goes back to what you said, is the diversity that exists at T.C. Williams is really a mirror of our society. And I really believe that the mirror, because T.C. Williams is so diverse, that our students will be better prepared to live and to work in a diverse world. I also really believe, and I said this to a group recently, I think that TC is great, but I think that we're going to have an opportunity for it to be greater. And again, it is because students will have meaningful, real life opportunities. In addition to that, you mentioned they will have some choice. We really want to build, as Pete and others build that master schedule, is to offer students a variety of choice. And it might be that students would change their minds. They need to be able to explore something and then make a change. So, but it's hard for us to just describe exactly what it will look like, and that probably wouldn't be fair, because what we want to do is allow the different levels of engagement to help drive and craft what is possible for the future.
Thank you.
That's
So,
helpful.
sounds like so much, and I know that a lot of us here tonight probably think that there's perhaps the plans are a little bit more, as you could say, more finished, and it's pretty apparent that they're still developing and they're still evolving, but the concept is what the school board and the school system are now at the juncture of, is moving forward and designing how this is all going to work. But so let me just ask just a couple questions about Mikaela. So, I mean, if you could click your heels together, would you want to go back to school and start to do high school all over again when this model is in place?
I don't know. I think it'll be very interesting. It would definitely provide more choices, which I think if you're someone who knows what they want to do, I think would be an amazing opportunity. And even if you don't know what you want to do, like, I think it allows, I guess, because of the flexibility, it allows for students to kind of explore that interest. So I guess, yeah, that seems,
Bridgette, how about yourself?
I would definitely want to come back and visit, one day in the 2020s, not only to see like the options and the opportunities that students have, but also how it affects the land use decisions in this city. I don't think, like, a question that hasn't been addressed here, I don't know if anybody has asked about this in the audience, but there's currently about $119 million budgeted for the capital improvement program, which is the 10-year budget priorities for the school and the city. And 119 million, almost 120 million, that has a big impact on the city and the economics in the city. And a new high school and expanding the high school that we currently have is going to have a dramatic impact on the land use decisions, what we're going to use our buildings for, how families and people who live here are going to be impacted by that. Obviously, one option for sites is Potomac Yard. Obviously, we're going to be developing a metro station there as well. That's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of transportation and how the connected campus is going to interact with, Seminary Road perhaps, and the recent decision to narrow that, and as well as our.
So
back in the audience there.
You point to a question that has come up from numerous of you, as if this is a big juggling act, right? And I say that because I know that there's been a lot of conversation with the city, with the school, with the city council. So talk to us a little bit, Dr. Mozingo and Ms. Anthony, a little bit about all the coordination that's going on. I mean, I've been reading, I'm sure some of you have, that there's been some characterizations that there's a gulf between the city and the schools, that it's narrowing, but there still is, because so much of this new design has to be coordinated with transportation, with building, with developments. To your point, Mikaela, is that, excuse me, Bridgette, that so much of what as I envision this, as I think about this, I'm thinking about, usually you drop off your kid at school, that's where you pick them up, right? But it's not gonna necessarily be like that. And it's going to be a place where students are going to be going to various places around the city. So talk to me a little bit about how is that going to work? How are we going to coordinate with all the city's resources so that we're all in this together for the right reason and the right outcome?
So, thanks for that question. I'll go backwards. First of all, the $119 million that's in the 10-year budget, it was 103 for construction, and the rest was for design. And that was based upon, it was about a number that was developed about 3 years ago, and it was based upon a prototypical square footage number that was actually, they used the existing TC as the basis for the formula, and we know first of all that was like a 260,000 square foot building, that for the projected students we're going to need like a 320,000 square foot building, and the new numbers based upon high schools that have been built over the last 3 or 4 years, several of which I've worked on in the metropolitan area, that number is going to have to be closer to $200 million, about 180 something million dollars, and that's on escalation. The construction industry numbers have skyrocketed just over the last couple of years, and the cost per square foot for the type of building that you need is very flexible, and that has lots of coordinating, all the things that we talked about earlier, and the technology, that number is going to grow, and the city manager had predicted that last year. As far as the gulf between the city and the school district, I don't think there is one. I came here a couple of years ago from the task force. I worked on the task force. The Joint City Schools Task Force required the city and the school system to work together. We have 3 meetings a month, from staff to corporate council to leadership meetings, and I just came from a subcommittee meeting tonight our roles are to monitor, first of all, to make sure that we are really working together, to monitor exactly what's being developed. But one of the issues that came up today about just because you co-locate a fire station with a school, or another type of city service with a school, which is actually what the mayor and Mr. Chapman were talking about a couple of weeks ago. Co-locating city services and city buildings doesn't necessarily mean that those agencies are properly working together, and that's what we have to do. We have to change the culture, look at our services, co-locate and make them more efficient, and then also bring in private partners to help pay for some of the, offset some of the dollars that it's going to cost, and there has to be something in it for them too. So we're working together very closely. I can attest to that. I have 4 meetings a month with, again, up and down the line. And it's not just, we're not sitting there just having a nice conversation. They're very purposeful, they're planned, they're action items, and it takes time. A year and a half doesn't make it happen. It's going to take 3 or 4 or 5 years, and I think that the citizens are getting their money's worth. The people are working very hard on the city side, on both projects like this and operations. The city and the school system, city manager and the mayor, former mayor and the current mayor, have insisted that we are collaborating on almost everything we do. Not always comfortable, it doesn't always, work out. Their agenda is a little different from ours, but we challenge each other constantly, and our job is to try to make things be more efficient for the city and to make things work.
Well, thank you. On that note, I apologize, but we have run up against the clock. And I didn't get to everyone's questions. I apologize, but we'll be here for a few minutes so you can approach us. Thank you all very much. Ms. Anthony, Dr. Mozingo, Mikaela, Bridgette, thank you very much. I know we could probably be talking here for a couple more hours, but maybe we'll have part 2 and invite Mr. Ballas, the TC principal, to come next time and give us even more an update. But I just want to say thanks to all of you for a great conversation. Thank you. Thank you.